Hi, welcome to Echoes from the Satellite. I'm Karen. This episode, we are going to talk about a bona fide science fiction classic, talking about Ursula K. LeGuin's The Lathe of Heaven. So, once again, I am just dumbfounded about why I didn't get around to reading this book sooner. I think I mentioned maybe on my first video that I hadn't read a lot of Le Guin until recently. Last year, I had picked up The Left Hand of Darkness and loved that. Prior to that, I had only read the Earthsea books when I was much younger. So I picked up Lathe of Heaven, read this, also loved it. So I'm happy to be able to talk about this book today. So Lathe of Heaven was originally written by Le Guin in 1971. It was published actually prior to that in Strange Adventures magazine in two parts. So, or no, I'm sorry, Amazing Stories magazine in two parts, just prior to publication as a novel in 71. So this is a book that was highly acclaimed when it came out. It won the Hugo Award in 71. It won Nebula Award, and it won the Locus Award for Best Novel. So this was, a well-regarded novel immediately when it came out of the gate. Le Guin has said that she was influenced by the writing of Philip K. Dick to some degree. I have only read a couple of things by Philip K. Dick, so I can't really say, how much the writing may resemble his. Those of you who are more familiar with Philip K. Dick can maybe chime in about that. There are also quite obviously a lot of references and influences from Taoism, which I'll talk about a little bit later after we go over the plot. So looking at the plot, essentially, I don't want to spoil the book for those of you who haven't read it, but I will briefly look at the plot. The story is set in a somewhat futuristic setting. So Le Guin wrote this in 71. I think it takes place in the early 2000s in Portland, Oregon. So the setting also is very relevant to the story. And it features primarily just three characters, and it focuses mostly on two characters. So our main character is George Orr. And George has the ability, I don't know if I would call it an ability, but his dreams frequently alter reality, and he has no control over it. So he's not able to dream about things that maybe he wants to have happen or come true. It's like almost a subconscious thing. And he wants it to stop. He desperately wants it to stop. And so at the beginning of the book, he has been taking a lot of drugs to try and stop himself from sleeping and dreaming. And so much so that he overdoses and has to be taken away to a hospital. And so at that point, because he's deemed, unsafe, he's threatening his own life, basically. He is sent to a psychologist, William Haber. And so Haber is operating out of this small clinic, and his specialty is dreams. He works with people who have sleep issues and dream issues. And so when George goes to see him, he is somewhat hesitant about telling him what his real issue is, because he thinks, well, the man will think I am insane. But eventually he describes his issue. And Haber, who is sort of a large, somewhat friendly, but maybe in sort of an artificial kind of way, man, he assures George that, oh no, we'll take care of you, we'll help you figure out what's going on. And he has a device which, when used with hypnosis, he can sort of induce dream state. After a few visits, Haber does figure out that George can indeed alter reality with his dreams. And although Haber has good intentions, he begins to use George to try to alter reality to, create the best reality for mankind. But unfortunately, this tends to backfire every time he does this. He also, I think it's a matter of, when you have power, power corrupts. He's not above using George to also elevate his own station. So Haber goes from having an office in a small clinic to eventually having his own institute and becoming one of the most influential men on earth. And Haber keeps forcing George to dream and try to fix, all the problems of society. But again, every time he forces George to do something, things seem to go horribly awry. And the two men are just diametrically opposed in their approach to life. Haber is an aggressive guy. George is a very passive guy. And so uh, it just, the two of them just have nowhere to go as far as their dialogue. And after a particularly bad dream where Haber tries to solve a problem that has been with mankind forever, George is really upset. And I'd like to read an exchange between them to kind of give you an example of what goes on between these two. So, in the office with the great corner window that looked out into the rain, George said, "Please stop using my dreams to improve things, Dr. Haber. It won't work. It's wrong. I want to be cured." "That's the one essential prerequisite to your cure, George, wanting it." "You're not answering me." But the big man was like an onion, slip off layer after layer of personality, belief, response, infinite layers, no end to them, no center to him. Nowhere that he ever stopped, had to say, "Here I stay." No being, only layers. "You're using my effective dreams to change the world. You won't admit that to me. Why not? George, you must realize that you ask questions that from your point of view may seem reasonable, but which from my point of view are literally unanswerable. We don't see reality the same way. Near enough the same to be able to talk. Yes, fortunately, but not always to be able to ask and answer. Not yet. I can answer your questions, and I do. But anyway, look, you can't go on changing things, trying to run things. You speak as if that were some kind of general moral imperative." He looked at Orr with his genial, reflective smile, stroking his beard. "But in fact, isn't that man's very purpose on earth? To do things, change things, run things, make a better world? No. What is his purpose then?" "I don't know. Things don't have purposes, as if the universe were a machine where every part has a useful function. What's the function of a galaxy? I don't know if our life has a purpose, and I don't see that it matters. What does matter is that we're a part, like a thread in a cloth or a grass blade in a field. It is, and we are. What we do is like wind blowing on the grass." There was a slight pause, and when Haber answered, his tone was no longer genial, reassuring, or encouraging. It was quite neutral and verged, just detectably, on contempt. "You're of a peculiarly passive outlook for a man brought up in the Judeo-Christian rationalist West, a sort of natural Buddhist. Have you ever studied the Eastern mysticisms, George?" The last question, with its obvious answer, was an open sneer. So I think you get a sense of where these two guys are and why it is so hard for poor George just to get help with his problem. The book goes on from there, And there is one other character that does appear, Heather Lalache, who is a lawyer who tries to help George. There are all sorts of amazing twists and turns, things that happen. I was really caught up in this book and unable to put it down. I enjoyed it a great deal. I will say that it is influenced by Taoism. Um, if you, I'll put this in the show notes or the episode notes. There's a nice, maybe 20-minute video with Ursula K. LeGuin and Bill Moyers um, that was on PBS. And I should note, so there was a PBS adaptation of this in 1980, and I remember seeing that as a kid, and I just revisited it the other day. They actually made an adaptation of this, and it was not bad given the limitations of the time. Um, and when they first broadcast it, I think they broadcast this interview with Bill Moyers, and LeGuin talks about her interest in Taoism. She actually did an adaptation or interpretation of the Tao Te Ching, and so her interest in sort of Eastern versus Western philosophy, the idea of not forcing things but going with the flow, and you will see that in this book. And one of the things that it made me think about um, is how our society today is so fixated on a quick fix. We want everything, you know, to be done quickly. We want to lose weight quickly. We want to learn a new skill quickly. We want to resolve all of our problems quickly, right? And that's essentially what Haber is trying to do. He's trying to take these problems that have um, formed in our society over generations or thousands of years and fix them in a blink. It's like the magic genie, right? He wants to just wipe these problems out, but you can't ever fix things that way. Um, and so it's not a heavy-handed book by any means, but I thought it was very interesting to see how these conundrums were resolved or not, or made worse even. Um, so yeah, I would highly recommend it. This edition of the book that I have here, which is from Scribner, is a pretty quick read, I'll tell you. It's only 184 pages, um, but her language is just so good, and she's such a great writer. So I would recommend to any of you to pick it up. And I think next on my list for her is The Dispossessed. I've heard a lot about that, so I'll be looking to pick that one up soon. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed it. I'll be back soon. I appreciate those of you who have come to my tiny little channel and left comments or subscribed. Thank you so much, and hope to see you again soon. Thanks. Bye.